It's December 16th. We are 9 days away from the traditional date of Christmas, traditional date of Hanukkah. Lots of people don't like this time of the year. People can't afford to buy gifts. People feel like they're in debt to have to buy gifts. Who's got the most lights? You know, the pressures of people who don't want to celebrate the holiday because it's pagan origins. It's not the birth of Jesus, Yeshua, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a tough time. Add into that, the stresses financially, a huge burden for so many people during this time of year. And I just pray that we'll have our eyes so focused on Him that as we move through, we won't hesitate to wish people the warmest greetings while at the same time shining the brightest light for truth and for doing things the way that Yahweh would have them to be done. Genesis chapter 37, even though it begins a new section, it really takes us all the way back to the Garden of Eden. They all do. But our focus point is not going to be back to the Garden of Eden. Our focus point is going to be as to what we've been doing almost every single study. I've been pointing out to you things that they're parts of the narrative that just don't even need to be there. If they weren't in there, it wouldn't change the narrative. Let me show you what I mean. Let's pick up here in Genesis chapter 37. This is the beginning of the Torah portion of Vayeshev. Jacob dwelt, and he dwelt. He dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph. Now, isn't that strange? That if I'm to say, that'd be like me saying, these are the generations of Alan. And instead of starting with Christopher, Lauren, I just go straight to one of my grandkids. And you'd say, why didn't you include all the rest? Well, one of the reasons being, is because Joseph's name means to give me another. God will provide another. It's not only a prophetic statement in regards to another child, Benjamin, but it's also prophetic in regards to Yeshua, the one like unto Joseph, the one who was favored by his father, the one who was rejected by his brothers, the one who was thrown into a pit or a grave, the one who came out of the pit and the grave, the one who ascended to the second highest position within the world, underneath his surrogate father. The parallels are there. I know in my own personal studies that I've found over 100 exact parallels of Joseph and Yeshua in order. It's pretty amazing. Tonight, what I want to do is I want to emphasize to you something that you just say, well, it doesn't even belong there. So we've got this situation here where Joseph is 17 years old. He was feeding the flock with his brethren. The lad was with the sons of Bilhah, with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought unto his father there an evil report. Okay, so Joseph is kind of like the I spy for his family, and he brings an evil report to his father concerning his brothers. Now, Israel loved Joseph more than all his children. And did you notice in verse 1, it uses the word Jacob. Now, these are the generations of Jacob. Here in verse 3, it says, in Israel, this is his new name, after wrestling the angel, after wrestling the messenger, after wrestling the man, after wrestling the God. Okay, he's now Israel. And Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Now, verse 4 is going to be very, very significant. So, to begin with, what I want you to do for your notes is to just make sure that you know this note, that Israel loved Joseph more than all the other boys. And whenever there's favoritism in the house, you might as well guarantee conflict is not far behind. Pay close attention that because Israel loved Joseph more than the other boys hated Joseph. That's going to be really significant for what we do tonight. And so they hated him, and notice what they could not do. They could not speak shalom to him. They could not speak peaceably to him. Not good. I don't know if you've ever experienced this in your own family, but if you have, it's not fun. It's obvious that the parents are favoring one child over the other child, and all the rest are left behind. And what we've talked about in years past, how do you respond whenever you're not the favorite? Oh, my stars. It's horrific. You'll do whatever it takes to get approval. Yeah, one and the same. Yeah, whether it's negative approval or positive approval, it'll still be the attention. That's what you want more than anything else. I need to be needed. That is the bottom line to every human need, above everything else. I can go without food for days and days and days. But to go through life not knowing that I'm needed, it'll crater me. It'll break my spirit. It'll sever me. It's not good. The boys hated him. And it says, and they couldn't even speak shalom to him. Couldn't speak peaceably to him. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him yet even more. Now, pay close attention to this, because you're going to see that because the father showed favoritism to a son and not to the others, that the brothers took it out on the favorite son. I'm going to emphasize this to you because this is going to be essential for understanding something else. And he said unto them, listen to me, boys, the dream which I've dreamed. We were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose and stood upright, and behold, your sheaves stood round about, and made obedience to my sheaf. And his brethren said to him, shall you indeed reign over us, or shall you indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet even the more for his dreams and for his debar, his words. 3 times already, we have this statement: the boys hated him, hated him, hated him. And now he comes in his immaturity at the age of 17, says, hey, boys, I just need to tell you about my dream. Not only am I dad's favorite, but I got a dream from the Lord, and I'm going to tell you this is how it is. And the boys hated him even more. Pay close attention to the hatred that's going on here. Verse 8, and his brethren said to him, are you going to reign over us? Verse 9, and he dreamed yet another dream and told his brethren and said, behold, I've dreamed a dream more. Behold, the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his father and to his brethren, and his father rebuked him and said unto him, what is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to you to the earth? Now, what's strange about Israel's statement here is he first rebukes him because he tells him about the dream about the sun, the moon, and the stars. And so his dad says something doesn't make any sense. You mean to tell me, Joseph, that me and my mom and your mom and your brothers are all going to bow down to you? His mother's dead. She's already died. He's 17 years of age. Benjamin's already been born. Rachel's already died. Why would he say that? Are you telling me that me, your mom, and your 11 brothers, why didn't he include Dina? Inquiring minds want to know. These are good questions. He goes on to say, and his brethren envied him. But notice what happens in verse 11. But his father envied his saying. This word, this dream. What does this mean? The father just got done rebuking him. Then he makes a comment, and the comment he ends up making to him is, so you think me, your mom, and your brothers are going to bow down to you? Is that what you think? And the brothers envied him, but now Jacob remains silent. Why? Why does he remain silent? We need to ask ourselves that serious question. A reason, if not the reason, and I think it's the reason, is because Jacob, Israel, is watching his family come apart at the seams. He doesn't know what to do. He knows that Joseph is hated by the brothers. That's been made evidently clear. He knows that he's shown Joseph favoritism. He knows that the dreams that Joseph have received are true. He knows they're not just about this life. He knows that they're for something that's yet to come. That's why he included me, your mother, and your brothers. Are we supposed to bow down to you? Which we find the fulfillment of this in Revelation chapter 12. So he's silent, but watch what happens. And his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. Now, from where they are to where Shechem is about 100 miles. It's a long ways away. So there's a big time gap here between verse 11 and verse 12. They're a long distance away. So the boys are out in Shechem. And Israel said unto Joseph, do not your brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, I'll send you to them. And he said to him, Hanani, here am I. What? What is Jacob thinking? Are you kidding? He's sending Joseph by himself to go check on his brothers who hate him threefold times, who envy him. They don't want to have anything to do with him. And they're off taking care of the father's sheep. What is he thinking? Why would he send the one who the brothers hate and envy to go check on the brothers 100 miles away? Unless there's more to the story. In verse 13, it says, after he sends him and he says, "Here am I," he said to him, "Go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with your brethren." Do you see that word well? It's the word shalom. So go check on your brothers to see if they are experiencing shalom. And he says, see if it's well with them. And do you see the word well? It's the word shalom, and well with the flocks. And shalom with the flocks. And bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. Now, if you remember, Shechem's probably not the most popular place for an Israelite. Do you remember Reuben and or Simeon and Levi? Do you remember what they did? They wiped out all the men of Shechem. And he's sending them out to Shechem to go check on his brothers who hate him and who envy him and who aren't going to bow down to him. And Shechem doesn't kind of like Jacob and the boys very well. And this is where Joseph's going. And he says, and a certain man who's unidentified found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. Now, this wandering is what I want to draw your attention to. The word for wandering is the Hebrew word to'ah. If I was going to spell it for your notes, if you can't see the board, it's T-O apostrophe A-H, to'ah. You say, well, what does that mean? It means to be wandering. It means to not really have a clue what you're doing. It means I'm lost. I'm not sure where I'm going, what I'm doing. In fact, I'm kind of blubbering my way through life, wondering, and a certain man finds him and sees him wandering. And he asks him a question. The question he asks him is, he says, what are you seeking? Which may remind you of what we studied this past Shabbat. The three questions that Esau asked each one of the messengers, and the three responses that they needed to give. So this man who finds him to'ah, wandering, and he's just wandering. It says he's wandering in the field. And we've spent a lot of time on the field. He's wandering in the world. He's looking for his brethren. He's looking for the sheep that are not in the promised land. They're in Shechem. They're a long ways from home, in an area where they're not loved and appreciated, way far away from daddy. There's no telling what could possibly happen. The man says, what are you looking for? And Joseph says, I'm seeking my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where do they feed their flocks? Which is exactly the same statement that we see in the Song of Solomon, by the way. Tell me, where is he whom my soul loves? The daughters of Jerusalem respond and say, well, you'll find him by the sheep. Just go where the sheep are. He's with the sheep. And the man said, they've already left here. I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. Okay, great. So they're not in Shechem. They're in Dothan. So he's not wandering anymore in a field. He's literally going to the place where the boys are. Now pay close attention to what the next verse says. The next verse says, and when they saw him afar off. So he's wandering. He's in the field. Then he goes to Dothan. He finds his brothers. And in the midst of it, his brothers, and here's a key word, his brothers see him afar off. It's going to be really important for us. When the brothers see him afar off, they make up their mind ahead of time what they're going to do. This is a very significant warning for you and for me. Be careful about making decisions when the decision you're making is a long distance away and you can't see it clearly, and you're leaving it up to your imagination as to what you're going to do based on your emotion. So he goes on, and when they saw him afar off, even before he came near to them, they conspired against him to slay him, and they said one to another, behold, the dreamer comes. Come now, therefore, let us slay him and cast him into some pit, and we'll say some evil beast has devoured him, and we'll see what will become of his dreams. And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, we can't kill him. And Reuben said unto them, don't shed any blood, but cast him into this pit that's in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands to deliver him to his father again. And many of you know the reason why Reuben said this was because he was planning on getting his brother out of the pit and returning him back to his father. I want you to go over to the book of Exodus. I want you to go to Exodus chapter 23. And in Exodus chapter 23, specifically in verse 4, the only other time in the Torah you're going to find this word Toah is in Exodus chapter 23, verse 4. And it's going to be very, very significant. So I'm going to put over here, Exodus 23, verse 4. It says here, now this is the Torah portion, Mishpatim, which means judgments. And these judgments, let me just tell you how significant they are for you and me. In Exodus chapter 19, the children of Israel were not allowed to come up onto the mountain. After they were given the judgments on how to relate to one another, they were allowed to come up the mountain. Without God's judgments on how we respond to one another, you can't ascend into his presence. Oh, yes, you can come into covenant relationship with him and you can say, whatever you say, I will do. But then you have to listen to what he says so that you'll know to do it. And in chapter 24, we find all kinds of individuals going up the mountain. So now in Exodus chapter 23, verse 4, in the middle of this section called Mishpatim, judgments, notice what it says here. The only other place where the word in the Torah, where Toah is used. It says, if you meet your enemy's ox or his ass going astray, you shall surely bring it back to him again. Now, the way that the Torah works and the way Scripture works is God, he may not give you all of the information that you need in one place. He'll give you the information that you need in another place. In one place, he'll provide commentary on the first place, and the first place will provide commentary on the next place. And the scripture builds one another up. And by using scripture with scripture, you can actually understand more about the scripture. Inquiring minds are asking, why would to'ah, this word for wandering, be used here in Exodus chapter 23, verse 4? And what does that have to do with the story of Joseph? So let's go ahead and let's identify something. Something that I shared with you last week. And I encourage you to put yourself in the stories of each one of the Bible characters. And I shared with you in times past, what I've done is I've treated myself like I was Jacob, or how would Moses had responded, or how about Isaac, or Sarah, or Rachel, or Leah. And every year I've gone through and I've lived out in my mind what it would have been like to see the story from their perspective. And when you list out your cast of characters in your story and identify who they are, you can better identify you in real stories in life. In Exodus chapter 23, verse 4, it says, if you meet your enemy's ox or his ass going astray, you shall surely bring it back to him again. So what we have here is we have an individual who's an enemy. We have the ox, which belongs to your enemy. And if this ox is to'ah, it's wandering, it's gone astray, then what the people who find it, what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to return. They're supposed to return the ox to their enemy. Now, if we were going to take the time tonight to identify who is the ox, I'm just going to put a couple of scripture references up here for you. I'm going to put Genesis chapter 49, and I'm going to put Deuteronomy chapter 33. The ox in scripture is always a reference to Joseph. He's the ox. The question is, who is the ox's owner? Well, the ox's owner is Jacob. But wait a minute. Who are the people that find the ox wandering in the field? Well, these are the brothers. So the brothers find the ox wandering in the field, but the ox belongs to their enemy. But in this story, we have likened the brother's enemy to being Joseph. But that's not the brother's enemy. The brother's enemy is their father. And they have misplaced their anger onto Joseph. Here's a law. It's not just a law talking about people who don't have oxes. or asses, but it's a story that God uses to give you pictures to help you understand how you should relate to one another. And you might ask yourself the question, how could it be that Jacob, the owner of the ox, is the enemy of those who find the ox? It's easy. Go back to Genesis chapter 37 and look at verse 4 again. And then you'll understand. Now, this is a major life lesson. Major life lesson. Genesis 37:4. I'll do verse 3 first. Now, Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. See, the hatred, they hated Joseph, but that was misplaced anger. They were taking their anger out on Joseph rather than out on their father, because they didn't know how to respond to the father. How do you talk to the person who's the authority of your life? How do you reprove or rebuke your father? And then when you begin to understand the story and how it unfolds, you'll go, that's exactly what the boys are doing. When they bring back that coat dipped in goat's blood, it's payback on dad. Whose coat is this anyway? Recognize it, hak or nah. Recognize the coat. What they were saying is, no, not this coat belongs to Joseph, Dad. This coat belongs to Reuben. Dad, you shouldn't have been showing favoritism. Dad, you shouldn't have created division within the house. Dad, you shouldn't have done those types of things. So Joseph is that ox. Could you imagine? So Hunter, you and your pa, Ron, are up there in Idaho, and you're out there in the middle of a field, and you see that the fence has been broken down, and here comes an ox. And the ox just went through the fence that was open, and he was wandering in the field. And you walk up to the ox and you look at the name tag on the ox, and you see that the name tag's Joseph. And you say, I'm so mad at you, Joseph. I hate you, Joseph. You're my enemy, Joseph. No, he's a cow. He's an ox. He's not your enemy. Now, granted, Joseph got a little bit coming to him. He was a little bit arrogant in his immaturity. But the fact of the matter is that he's not the enemy. Do you remember I said that when the boys saw him afar off, what did they do when they saw him afar off?
They plotted against him.
That's exactly what they did. They plotted against him, saying, we're going to kill this dude. Who were they really angry at? The siblings are taking it out on one another because their anger towards dad is so great, but they can't take it out against dad, so they take it out against where dad put his focus. And when the boys saw him afar off, and here's why I emphasized to you this concept of afar off. If you happen to find an ox wandering in the field, and this has to do with the lost sheep of the house of Israel, Joseph, Ephraim, Manasseh, the ox, or an ass, part of the lost sheep of the house of Israel, then what you're supposed to do is return it to the enemy. So you're supposed to return it. But do you see what the boys didn't do? What the boys didn't do is they didn't return it because they made their decision from afar off. You know, one of the things that most of us are not very good at? Confronting the real enemy. We're not very good at it. We're good at picking someone who's not the enemy because they're available. Oh, they may have irked you the wrong way, but they're not your enemy. He's 17. He's immature. Instead of the boys seeing him from afar off and then making up their mind ahead of time that they're going to kill him, why didn't they just say, you know what? He's 17. He's immature. He's been coddled. He's dad's favorite. He's got the coat of the firstborn. Let's rough him up a little bit, but let's tell him, say, look, we're tired of your piety around the house, around the tent, around the flock. Slap him a couple of times. Talk to him. But they weren't willing to draw close. Do you know why? And why do I have such a hard time confronting people who are close to me? Because I'm afraid. I'm afraid of my inconsistencies, that they'll be pointed out. I'm afraid of hurting their feelings. I'm afraid that they'll reject me. There's all kinds of reasons. But once it's brought to the surface, which later on in chapter 45 it will, once it's brought to the surface, everything goes good. But it's got to be brought to the surface. Now notice what Exodus chapter 23 tells us. It tells us if you find an ox or an ass that is toah, wandering in the field and it's gone astray, you shall surely bring it back to him. That's important. See, what the boys should have done is they should have, when they found the ox, they should have brought it back to their enemy, to Jacob, their dad, and they should have had a discussion with him right then and there. That's why in Exodus chapter 23, verse 4, says, if you find an ox or an ass and it's gone astray, and you find it, return it back to its owner, and the owner is your enemy. Now, let me explain to you something that's very important for us to understand in life and relating to people. Oh, by the way, let me give you a 30-second commercial. You know, the boys really blew it here. And Joseph really did take it on the chin. And Joseph was in jail for 13 years for not doing anything wrong, for, yeah, being a little immature. But that time was valuable. Being alone, feeling isolated, wondering what's going on. Why is it happening like this? Several years later, when Joseph is 30 years old, he's taken out of the prison and he interprets a dream. So these Torah portions, the next two Torah portions, are all about dreams. Dreams are so important. So he dreams and he interprets the cupbearer and the butler's and the baker's dreams. After 3 days, you'll be restored. After 3 days, you'll be put to death. A very significant truth from Hosea chapter 5 and chapter 6. So there's this reality here that Joseph gets elevated, and there's a famine. And the boys come to him during the famine because they're out of food. Eventually, what Joseph does, he says, do you have another brother? Yeah, we do, but he's really, really close to our father. His soul is knit with him. Well, go get him. Sorry, can't go get him. Boy, if anything happened to him, my father would die. Well, eventually, you know the story. They go and they get Benjamin. They bring Benjamin back. And what's interesting is that Benjamin is going to be taken captive because there's a ploy that's been set up against him. And don't you find it interesting, for those of you who know the end of the story, don't you find it interesting that all of the brothers band together to bring the son of the wife that was loved, not the son of the wife that was hated? He was left in Egypt for a long time. But all the boys band together to return Benjamin to their father. They were perfect. They learned a valuable lesson in life. I made a mistake, a bad calculation. I was wrong. They corrected it. Amazing. You know what I find interesting in the story? Nowhere in the story do we ever find that the boys ever restored their relationship with their father. Nowhere. A root of bitterness goes a long way. A long, long way. It'll kill you. It'll affect everybody in your life. Hebrews chapter 12. This Torah portion, like every one, is packed to the gills. Why was Jacob sending Joseph out to meet his brothers? I'll tell you why. Jacob was at wit's end. He saw his family was falling apart. He didn't know what to do, and he knew the boys hated him. That's why he sent Joseph. Because he knew that he couldn't do it. So he had to send the one who the boys could not speak peaceably to. Remember verse 4? To go see if they were in peace. To go see if the flocks were in peace. In shalom. With hopes. This is my last straw. This is my last hope. Joseph is my last hope. I have spent so many years showing favoritism to Rachel and not to Leah. I've shown favoritism to Joseph and Benjamin and not to the other 10 and to Dinah. Even when Dinah was raped, I was silent because she was the daughter of Leah. Oh, if we could just get this through our thick heads. How important it is to maintain the best communication, to love people for where they're at, to help people where they're at. But don't make decisions from afar off. You got to go face to face. You got to get in their face. Somebody's got to get in your face. You got to kick somebody's hiney. Somebody's hiney's got to be kicked. You gotta take the ox that's wandering in the field and not knowing where it's going, what it's doing, and you need to give it some direction. The boys aren't here in Shechem. Are you kidding? Why would the boys be here in Shechem? Don't you know you guys have a pretty bad reputation? They're over in Dothan. Go to Dothan, you'll see where they are. And so he goes on his way. He's going to check on his brothers, but the last time that he checked on his brothers, he brought an evil report back to their father. This is why the brothers hated him. But the brothers really hated him because he was doing what his father wanted him to do by spying on the brothers to bring back an evil report. Oh, gossip, slander, backbiting, tattletaling, narking, name it. Favoritism, division within the house, inferiority, needing attention, desiring attention, longing for attention, the pain that goes through all of it. You do all of these things and you have to say to yourself, my stars. Jacob was at wit's end to send the one that's visibly hated into the lion's den. That's when you know. But did he know? But did Jacob know prophetically what was going to happen? Did he know that the dreams were going to come true? Did he know those types of things? I think he did. But if we look at it from a relational perspective, how easy it is to misplace your anger. You're angry at one person, but you displace it onto another. Happens all the time. How do I resolve that? Don't be afraid to get close. Don't be afraid to listen. Don't be afraid to understand something from somebody else's perspective. And if we do that, the ox will be returned to the enemy, to the owner. If your enemy's ox is going astray, or his ass is going astray, to'ah, and you find it wandering in the field, return it to its owner. Return. Shuv. Keep your eyes open for things that are lost and return them. That's why Yeshua came for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. The house of Joseph, the ox, who would be returned to the owner, who they were treating as his enemy. And the story unwinds in a narrative with things that we wouldn't even consider. And what's this man in the story doing who finds Joseph wandering in the field? Take that verse out, and the story reads like a novel that's building up to a climax. Stick that in there. It doesn't need to be in there unless it's the connecting point to a Torah commandment later on down the road. Nothing is insignificant in the Torah. Every jot, every tittle, every letter, every word, they're all significant. Things to think about as you head into the rest of your work week. Vayeshev, and he dwelt. These are the generations of Jacob, Joseph. Let the story unfold, and may we be wise enough in our own lives to be able to say, yeah, I understand what's going on. I understand what's going on because I'm living this in my own life. Let me end the recording and wish you guys a wonderful night and happy early Shabbat.